Welcome to the IVF Journey with Dr. Michael Chapman, the podcast for couples who struggle with infertility and want to fulfill their dreams of becoming parents. In this podcast, you'll learn actionable strategies to deal with infertility from Dr. Michael Chapman, or Prof as he's affectionately known. Prof is the co-founder of IVF Australia and is a leading Australian infertility specialist who has helped over 3,000 couples realise their dreams of becoming parents. To access previous episodes packed with ideas, solutions and tips that actually work, head over to Dr. Chapman's IVF podcast on iTunes. You can also ask questions by contacting Dr. Chapman's rooms on 1-800-111-483 or by emailing him michael.chapman@ivf.com.au.
That first cry of a baby born after the long journey of IVF remains one of the most beautiful experiences in the world. As an obstetrician and an IVF specialist, I've had the privilege of experiencing this over many thousands of times in my long career, but I still remain moved by each baby's first cry. It signifies the end of a long journey and the beginning of a new life. This is Professor Michael Chapman, co-founder of IVF Australia and host of the IVF Journey podcast. Thanks for tuning in. To access all the previous episodes, head over to my website, www.theivfjourney.com, and select IVF Journey Podcast from the navigation menu. You'll also be able to find the various services that we provide at IVF Australia. The news that everybody doesn't want. The phone call from the nurse saying the cycle has not been successful. The initial reaction is clearly going to be that of sadness and grief, that all that time, effort and money has not produced the pregnancy that you so desired. It will take some time to get over that pain. A couple will wonder why it didn't work. They will start by looking at things that they did during the cycle that might have made it unsuccessful. However, there is really nothing that a couple could do during a cycle which would contribute to the failure of that cycle. Taking medications, flying, too much exercise, eating the wrong foods, there's no evidence whatsoever that anything will interfere with the process of embryo development and implantation in that month of treatment. Clearly, being in the best health for the months leading up to treatment is important. And looking forward, perhaps there are things that you could change that may improve your chances next time. By far the most common reason why a cycle hasn't been successful is related to the embryo. Increasingly, we know that even the most beautiful looking blastocyst has a high chance of carrying lethal genetic abnormalities. In our PGD program, where we biopsy embryos to look for genetic abnormalities, we know that at 30, some 40% of embryos are definitely doomed because of genetic abnormalities. And that rises at 40 to being 80%. And by 45, 98% of embryos that are produced, even though they look good, will be carrying genetic abnormalities that will prevent pregnancy, or if a pregnancy does occur, will result in miscarriage. Unfortunately, there's little we can do for that going forward. People have suggested adjuvant therapies using androgens, testosterone, vitamins, CoQ10. The evidence, however, is small or non-existent. There is a small group of patients in whom it is the uterus that's the problem, that the lining of the womb perhaps was out of sync with the timing of the embryo transfer. There's a window of some 2 days when the lining of the womb is receptive to an embryo to allow it to attach and implant and develop. In most cases, the lining of the womb has been supported in the second half of the cycle by either progesterone or HCG injections. And so that's unlikely to be a cause, but we do have some concerns in some patients. There can be structural damage within the uterus that will also impede the attachment of the embryo. The best way to find that out is to have a hysteroscopy, and perhaps if it hasn't been done, that would be a worthwhile thing to be doing before moving forward to another cycle. We might find adhesions in the uterus if you've previously had a curette. We might find a structural abnormality that you've had since birth, a septum stretching down into the uterus that is fibrous in nature and therefore doesn't have the blood vessels to support a pregnancy when it attaches to that particular part of the uterus. We can remove the septum. That may improve pregnancy rates. Fibroids impinging on the cavity of the uterus can also have an impact. Again, they can be cut away. So we do go looking for these various causes after unsuccessful IVF, although in most cases we don't find a cause. And that is because the vast majority are related to the embryo. So after an unsuccessful cycle, the first step is to have a consultation with your specialist to talk through the various potential causes, to have further testing if that's indicated, and to work out what form of treatment might make things better next time. Sadly, getting pregnant is a numbers game we have very little influence on. In natural conception, the chances of success are 1 in 6, the roll of a dice. We've all rolled a dice playing Monopoly or some other board game and know that you can throw a 6 first time. We also know you can throw it many times and not get the 6. Getting pregnant in natural conception is no different to that. In IVF, the 6-sided dice becomes more like a 2 to 3-sided dice. Therefore, the chances each cycle are higher, but it is still a game of chance. The data that we've recently published in the Medical Journal of Australia shows quite clearly that those couples who stay on to have repeated cycles do end up with higher and higher pregnancy rates. We know, for instance, that a 32-year-old, after 3 cycles of treatment, has an over 80% chance of a baby. If you're 40, you need 6 cycles to reach those sorts of numbers, and perhaps it never reaches 80%, but certainly 75% after 6 cycles in women over 38 is a factual representation of the data from all women having cycles in Australia and New Zealand. So keeping at it, provided you're producing embryos, is the best advice. Nature and technology will be helpful for the vast majority of cases. Recovering from the distress of failure can take time. For some patients, 2 or 3 months of not trying is required before they have the courage to start again. From a physical point of view, there seems no problem in starting virtually straight away. That eggs are present in the ovary, and stimulating those eggs from cycle to cycle seems to be pretty similar. So back-to-back cycles are possible. But I have to say my recommendation is to at least have a month off just to recover from the mental distress that not being successful brings. In summary, being unsuccessful in an IVF cycle is actually not unusual. The numbers show us that. What we do know is that repeating the cycle does end up with higher and higher cumulative success. So don't give up just because you've had one unsuccessful cycle. And don't forget that you can access all the previous episodes by going to our website www.theivfjourney.com and select IVF Journey Podcast from the navigation menu.
Thank you for listening to the IVF Journey with Dr. Michael Chapman, the podcast which helps couples negotiate their way through the IVF journey, all the way to parenthood. You can also ask questions by contacting Dr. Chapman's rooms on 1800 111 483 or by emailing him michael.chapman@ivf.com.au.